How's that? Is that better? What do you think there? I'm very sorry there, guys. Is that better, Victoria? Sorry. Yeah, I put the mic piece on and it didn't come back up. Hey, very good. So once again, let me just go back and review here. Thanks for the information. Or I've had it on the stream deck, but it didn't show up. I was going to finish up the Porsche 911 Target today, and here, lo and behold, when I wrapped it up on Tuesday, I went into the whole idea of trying to get the materials right, and I had some background work and some temper work to do, and I didn't have the right materials, so I kind of just had to order some materials to finish that illustration up, and I'll be definitely will be picking that up on Tuesday. So I appreciate your patience with me, and I apologize for the interference here. But in the interim, that'd be kind of nice to go back in, and I'll show you where we were, for example, with that 911 at the end of this program. But I thought it'd be interesting to go back in a little bit of product design. Is this a keep? No, it's not a keep. It's an American. It's a whistle program, Victoria. I was invited to come in on board with a very interesting gentleman here in town. He was going to develop. He does metal whistles, very, very handcrafted, simple operation. He does them worldwide. Is an absolute phenomenal business. But he was interested in expanding his product line and had nowhere to go in terms of what do I do with an injection molded part or a plastic whistle? How can you do that? So I was brought on board to be his design guy, and these are concept sketches. This whole portfolio with product design, it's just a little window or an aspect of what the product development's series is like, or the discipline is like. I've got a whole bunch of stuff we can talk about in future streams, but I thought it'd be kind of nice to go back and show you the history of this whistle development. And I've got some things in the end, some aftermarket things that he did as a result of all the information or design work that I did for him. The interesting thing about the finishing aspect of it is at the end of the whole process, he invited me to come back in and do some expansion work for his market at Walmart and different corporations around the globe. And some sports facilities and elements, for example, measuring devices for athletic fields, some discipline practice materials for young people in athletics. So let's start it. These are, I'll go here, this is the very beginning of the process. I just started to generate some very interesting thumbnail sketches. These are plan view studies of whistles, for example, the whistle in here, the holding in here. And let me just go back and see if I can get this thing to level up here a little bit. This is phase one, the first set of sketches, just done with ballpoint pen. Then I did a whole series of little color studies based on the whole process there. Let's see if we can get those in place. So I went from that color in this black and white series into and I just jumped back and forth between, okay, what about a plan view? What about an elevation? What does it look like in plan view? What about perspective? What are we looking at here from a molded part? So these are little thumbnail sketches, again, in plan, add a little bit of color so we can see what the actual format would be like. And then from that page went into something like this, where we go back to elevations again, a little bit of plan view study here, some just very quick little fast gestures on what those forms might look like to have him look at it. And by the way, I was really interesting too. He's an interesting guy. He really appreciated the aspect of my design input for his company. It opened up a whole series of marketplaces for him. More about that later in the end of the program here. But it was just exciting to watch him get excited about what his product could look like not from a metal stamping piece or a fabrication process, but an actual blow molded or an injection molded piece. Very difficult to do, but he is in the game plan, and I guess it's up and running in the marketplace, and he's selling a billion of them, so good for him. But this is a genealogy of where we got to from start to finish, and you'll see some finished pieces near the end here down the line. Does that make sense, Victoria? It's not a key fob. It looks like it, but it's just, again, American Whistles, name of the company. Phenomenal stuff. So here we go. Back again to little elevation sketches. Perspective sketches, again, what these forms might look like. It's just moving through shape and shape, how to grip them, what the actual plan view look like. Thumb grip back here, blowing area here, for example, up on top. And again, back from color back to some very simple little thumbnail sketches based on some very unusual plan views. You actually would wear this. That's almost like a ring system here. Let me pull that down just a bit. You would actually wear this as a whistle on your index finger and blow at both ends and become more active in the athletic events that you're dealing with. Something happened in this page, for example, I thought was interesting. What came out of it was these sketches began to generate something. This is an interesting approach right here. What would that look like if we started to develop that a little further? So all these exploratory sketches, you'll find as we go through this process today, they went back and forth, but that one kind of hit him a little bit, as did this one. So let's go back in here, next page of sketches here to generate this, guys. Now notice I went back in after that conversation and started to put some color back in this. Let's move this portfolio around a little bit so you see the sketches. Moves back to color a little bit, what it might look like with some different variation. He was very avid about getting into a lot of color change too. It wasn't a matter of just being all black or all white or all green or whatever. You wanted combinations of like co-molded areas, maybe a soft portion against a hard plastic piece. A very elaborate piece of things to take care of here. So again, I would go with him, since he was really new in the design process and how it all activated, what the procedure was. I'd go through a series of thumbnail sketches like this, then come back with a little bit of color like this to kind of show him what the variation in theme might look like, to kind of clarify the communication and to not upset him in terms of what his expectations were. Again, from perspective, back into plan views, whistles, looking at different shapes. How can you stretch this thing? Can you do some neat things with some plan view shape to make it a little more intriguing? And again, above all else, to separate it from the marketplace that's out there now. There's very little out there that looks like this. So I really commended him for having the courage to step out of the box, so to speak, and do some very interesting things from a whistle point of view. So here again, back to, again, notice it here again, story. Back to black and white, plan view, and then do a little bit of color to see how the breakups might look like, or what they could potentially become. So again, here's another piece here. Again, from that back to another series of soldier sketches, just looking at themes and concept work all the way through here as we went through it. And again, looking at again, black and white, very real fast, real gesture sketches and oh, pardon me, let's get this down a little bit. Gesture sketches and elevation to kind of set some themes together, then come back in again with a little bit of color. So the pattern was such: black and white into color, black and white into color, so you can see what the texture changes and what the materials might look like. So here we are, and again, from that family into another series. This is kind of a variation of a theme. Let's go back to this one here. This one kind of impressed him a little bit, a little different, almost shield-like. So went back to that, did a little variation of the theme with an actual finger grip or a hand grip underneath it all that you actually hang onto the whistle itself. Again, different forms, how to grab it, and then going through the process itself. That would be it. Again, back to color studies. Just very simple gesture sketches to kind of get them used to the process of how we think and how we generate ideas. Again, from that, again, to black and white, and we'll kind of move along here very rapidly. Again, back into color. These sketches, for example, color and black and white. These color pages take about maybe 5 to 10 minutes to generate. Very quick. I'm just going through a whole series of lucid sketches with a little bit of marker and ballpoint pen and some background work, and just kind of give them a feel for what the forms look like. So it was, I learned that working with Vic very early on, he had a hard time translating from plan view, elevation view, and into perspective. So I was very careful to keep it plan view, and then open it up when he began to see some things that he favored, then go to perspective and say, now, Vic, it looks like this. We could do this with it. This could go, for example, soft. This could go molded. That could go back to a color change. A lot more conversation came about as a result of that. It was very interesting to see him put that together. So again, back into plan views. This started to take on some character here. Let me just kind of get my hands straight. This took on some character. Something about this fan shape he really liked, and it was another possibility of looking at a theme to work on for this new product line of injection molded American whistles. He was all metal prior to this. He was stepping out of the box and trying to separate himself from the marketplace, from all the other manufacturers. He's the only one in the world, by the way, that manufactures them by hand in the automation process. Really fascinating to see it come together. Again, elevations back into color. So there we are. And again, back in a little perspective. Now I felt more comfortable going into some perspective work for him and letting him see what kind of forms could be generated, how it would quickly come together with the actual blowing portion, and the grip end of here, and again into this, back into color again. Now it started to open up a little bit. Now this is the point at which I think this storyline started to take a bit of a different twist to it. There was a very interesting set. Let me get these all lined up. I think that'll work okay, guys. There was an interesting set of all these sketches, for example, all this preamble, all this foundation was laid to simply put this story together, to build his confidence and his confidence in me, and then begin to open up the avenue of approach and getting ideas and sketches down and getting a little more adventuresome with some of the forms. So notice from the very early series of sketches, now we moved into a lot more complicated forms and shape and section studies that he could see what was taking place in the mold process itself. Here was an elevation, then into perspective. And I always have a habit, especially with a new client like that, working with some section changes so we can see what's taking place with the entire process. Again, the grip portion here, and then the aperture of blowing the whistle, and then this echo chamber coming out of a little scallop in the section changer. This could be kind of a nice, this could be all done in silver, for example. That could be a black accent. It could be a pearl accent. Things to look at in terms of making his line different in the marketplace. Again, notice now you see a series of sketches that are a lot more adventuresome, taking more chances and changing the shape, adding more blister, a little more roundness, getting longer with the element in between here. So it started to shift very rapidly here, and I thought it was really interesting to see him really gravitate to this. He loved the idea of being very organic and very fluid looking, and was not afraid to try and to build some prototypes here as he went through it. So again, much more adventure. another family of forms here. He really thought that this. Let's go back to this for a moment. That was an interesting departure. This one came about as a result. Let me go back here for a second. I won't waste the time. This came about from one of the earlier sketches that he kind of liked. I went back to that. Yeah, the contour lines. Yeah, they really do, Victoria. They really help to kind of describe, especially with a new client like this. He was not familiar with the design process as you and I are, and you know full well if you do too avant-garde and you scare some things in terms of being very, very torturesome and very twisted in some of the surfaces and not defining what the shapes look like, it can be, you lose your audience. So I was very careful to put some perspective things together, throw in a center line and throw some section around it so you could see what the contours were. How would you mold it? Is it a two-part mold? Is it laterally separate? Does it vertically separate? All those things are taken into account when putting the process together here. So again, carrying on, last little thumbnail saying, getting a little slippery with it, getting a little bit more romantic with some of the shapes up on top. Again, with a color band maybe up on top, much more bulbous at the back for grip and the like. So all these factors are taken into account, and he was very good at directing that process. So again, notice again, back again to a plan view and a little bit of perspective sketch. Again, this is an open aperture here where it actually comes in. That's where the echo chamber is, and it comes through below this thing, below it, end of it here, and the sound comes through it. And again, playing into this whole idea of getting. Now here, this is interesting. From that sketch there, he said, let's get a look. What does this look like in terms of color? So the next sketch we did was a nice family form of there it is, and just a little bit of pastel marker. And notice how it had a whole different feel to it. It didn't look like a whistle. It looked like an automotive form. Much more sculptural. I believe that he really saw the difference in, I can put color, yeah, that could be cold molded, it could be soft against hard, or vice versa. This could be a cold mold piece here, all solid color here. So as we're going through the process with him, it really began to open up the conversation about what possibilities are out there as far as color, textures, materials, and so forth, other than the metals he was working with. So for me, it was a great education to work with a very talented individual who was really a master at the manufacturing cycle. So learned an awful lot and worked an awful lot with him to get things done. So first color study, liked it. On again to revising the formula. Notice a little bit of change of pace in through here, and again a little bit more scallop on the back side here to kind of get the more grip area to it, and then again back into color. There is another variation of the theme that just changes the entire character of this thing. And he was excited about the fact. And by the way, all is said and done here, this was going down to Walmart, their headquarters in Arkansas, for a presentation to open up the SKU systems where he is worldwide. So very careful to do a lot of good exploratory sketches so he could tell his story in front of his clientele base. That's one of the things I always look forward to in working with a client. I do a lot of sketches, a lot of prep work, so that client can take that story with them and say, we started here, went to this, then got to this, and the story is unfolding before his very eyes, his or her very eyes. So again, a little color study, back into ballpoint pen, a little change of pace here as we go, back into color. Notice, it's black and white and translate into color. Didn't really care for the color here, but some of the surface work was interesting. We kind of a little bit of a dive off of this thing, a little bit of round form up on top, different shape, nice looking plan view, and elevation was interesting. A little bit more forward thrust to it, so a little bit more personality to it than we had in the past. And let's go down the line here with this one. And again, now changing from that into perspective. Notice every sketch now it's pen sketch. Basic character, then the following page, what it looks like in color. That wasn't dictated by Vic. That was dictated by me. I wanted to make sure that he knew, here's a basic bare bones. This is a potential color system. It's not that we have to live there, but it's actually part of the process of showing how the whole process begins to unfold to sell your idea to your client and vice versa, and having him have confidence in your approach. So what do you think, Victoria? Making sense so far? Very, very long-winded. This is probably about a 2-month project, 2 to 3 month project, going back and forth. But an awful lot learned in the spectrum of things. Really interesting guy to work with, and I'll be doing some more with him, more works with him in the future here. He's going to expand his line again, so hopefully I'll get a call from him. We'll start working again. Again, black and white and into color. Notice again, very simple. Add a little bit of color accent band in this thing, a little bit of detail up on top. Again, is this a soft cold molded piece? Is that cold molded? How do these surfaces break up, and how do they begin to work with it? I'm very curious to see a finished produced piece in hand. Yeah, me too. I think I have to get in touch with him so I get some of the parts that he actually cranked out. There's one in the end. You'll see he does have a physical part for it. I'll get a piece of that from him, and I'll begin to show that in some of the future streams. Again, notice back to the creative process again, conceptualizing another series of forms and shapes, perspective, and again, back to elevation, and again into color. And again, notice very simple, bright yellow, but try to be very clean in terms of what we're looking at and how the whole thing is beginning to move together, and to give them a new platform in the marketplace that separates himself from all the other metal manufacturers that are out there. Interesting to note here, Victoria, that you just brought up an interesting point. Going through the whole process here, about midstream, he asked me a question. So I'm interested in doing a safety whistle, like for skiers or individuals in hazard areas in Europe, river, any incident that might take place in terms of being a hazardous situation where somebody has to sound an alert of some sort, like a hunting accident, whatever it might be. So I turned the corner and he asked me, could you put together some sketches on some safety whistles that might apply to this line as well, that could be molded in plastic or also stamped in metal? So I'd be happy to. So from that generation there, molded right back to this, a different format, a lot flatter, a little slimmer for storage purposes, for example, in your ski glove or your cap or whatever it might be, or a backpack. Easy to access, and in case of emergency, you get to it. So this is the first ballpoint pen sketch I did in terms of getting that theme started for him. Very flat rectangular piece, a little bit of taper to it, then switched over. There's a color illustration, and as lo and behold, I couldn't believe when I showed him this sketch, he went, that's it, this is the one we're going to manufacture. So isn't that amazing how from all the stuff we've done, we'll get to this in a moment here, but all the stuff that we've done, switching gears and going to a safety whistle, one pen sketch, and I think this really told me, for example, and pardon me for injecting this thought, but what this taught me was the fact that I think through the entire process, my forte has always been to earn the trust and confidence and respect of my client base. I never assume anything. I don't go in there, for example, saying, no, I own the world and gosh, here I am. Step aside. I've always had the aspect and being taught and tutored well about the client is the most important part of the process. So I think what I'm saying here from sketch one, the first part of this portfolio, coming all the way through the ranks and seeing all these thumbnail sketches and then color variations, little by little, the confidence and the trust was gained from Vic to me, and it began a really solid business relationship. He's really a great guy to work with and chat with. Interesting things. So that, all that to say that from that one sketch, they said, that's it. We're going to manufacture that. And I do have an example of that. I don't have it in the office, but I'll bring it in and let you see it maybe sometime next Tuesday when we wrap up the Porsche piece. But that was amazing. He just said, that's it. That's flat. It's very thin, easy to store. It's got a little bit of color to it. We can change color variation here. And that could be, again, cold molded against metal, against plastic, or else all molded itself. So what do you think, Victoria? Makes sense to you? I was amazed when he looked at that sketch. He said, man, that's it. How cool is that? So very interesting, that design. Yeah, it is. It's interesting, and it's just a simple whistle, but it's amazing what you can do. And you know this, Victoria. You've gone through the process very nicely. It's amazing what you do with subtle little changes. It's not a matter of being filigreed or overly done. It's just taste. We're looking at. To me, I've said this before in previous streams. It always amazes me is you take the 5 basic solids. They're very simple: cube, cone, cylinder, etc., etc. Very simple, but they're all building blocks. If you just took one of those shapes, this is very much like a cuboid. It's just a simple rectangular form. But how you break it up and flatter it makes a huge difference. So I think those are the things I always work with, even in car design. I don't get into a lot of Gilda Lily pieces and stuff. It just, yeah, it did. It spoke to them like, this is it. This is my company. And I think that's important too, Victoria, that whenever we work with somebody, just really translating design in terms of coming in and saying, look, I'm listening to you. Victoria, you're my client. I'm listening very carefully to what you want to establish. I'm not going outside the box. I'm going to give you what you've asked for. And then what about these variations on theme? And I think that's the secret to success. And I've always been a long believer in the fact that when I hear people, for example, in design presentations or even in language say that use the term I constantly, that to me is a red flag. I bespeaks of dictatorship. We bespeaks of leadership. Why don't we look at this? Why don't we take a peek at it? Let's look at this collectively. What do we think about this? Join the conversation, engage the individual. So all that to say that as a result of that, it was really interesting. As a result of that whole process here, lo and behold, that was wrapped up. And he came into me the next meeting we had. And he said, I've had this idea. One of the reps from Walmart came in and said, hey, we want to expand the market into, for example, location boards or trading boards. This would be a pallet, for example. So one thing, I've got a pallet, like a dry erase board I want to work with. It has a screen on it. You can change the surfaces and clean it up and add new pieces to it. Second, a training exercise for lacrosse players or soccer players, then a measuring device, and on it went, and then into packaging. So I'll take you through the process here in a moment. So that wrapped up that emergency whistle, that safety whistle. Then he came back. Could you do just like a whiteboard, maybe 11 by 17 or 18 by 24? We can have different bases on it. This, for example, could be soccer, basketball, could be football. But again, this transparency piece just rolls over the top of that. Then the coach can begin to highlight certain parts of like hockey, for example, or a soccer. That transparency draws on top of that and goes through a play sequence with this team. So that was the initial sketch we did, and he loved that idea. So that went to press, from what I understand. And second, he came to me and said, what about, there it is in a little bit of color translation. So you see a little bit of, this is more of a transparent piece. Here's the layout on top. This literally rolls over the top, and you write on that surface and go through the presentation of what plays you want to work with. This is an interesting one too. This is a molded piece. Two almost pyramid forms that came out of that just molded, and then this is a molded crossbar that can rotate. And what he was using this for was he wanted to get into a training device for soccer players, how to wrap over, how to for example, skip over or pass through, chip a ball over the top of the thing without disturbing the actual cross member part itself. So that became an interesting part. He wanted to put his logo on it, and again his colors and so forth. But that was a roaring hit with Walmart too. Quite frankly, I don't know where the status of this one is yet from a manufacturing point of view, but I know it's in the hopper to be made and manufactured to go to different training systems worldwide. So that was another aspect he wanted me to do. Love the idea. Went right to press. There it is in translation. A little bit of the turf. This is where it rotates. That's what it might look like in terms of that's the individual piece that fits in here. And there it is. Very simple as we go. This was really interesting. Came back in and said, I need a measuring device that has these different pellets in it or these different pieces in it that I can kind of utilize as a gun, for example, to measure fields. I can plant a stake. These are stakes, for example. A little detail down there is like a drawing stake that he has some string attached to it, and it all is packaged in this Gatling gun approach. And he had the idea but couldn't figure out how to translate it visually and how to make it and manufacture it. Notice this is the actual cartridge area. There's a cap over the top of that, and when you press a button, this thing rotates around and picks out these darts, these spikes. And these spikes, for example, on a field could be laid down. Let me turn the page here. When it comes out, here's the actual finished piece itself. There it is. That's the actual finished sketch. I mean, look at that. Isn't that cool? His idea was really neat. These come out of these cartridges, these cylinders. This is the coil that you just, and again, these caps had a little bit of a threading device or a holding cap on top of it. Then you wrapped around and you moved it, and that would measure off an area in getting the field prep for baseball, in this case soccer, it could be basketball, indoor, outdoor, field hockey, lacrosse. Just an ingenious piece, a little elevation study about what this is the back device that kind of rotates and tells you where you are in terms of through the spike. That comes through and connects with the spool system up front. And this is an interchangeable cartridge. You could actually drop this down and load it back in. That could be a chalking device. It was all these little pieces are putting in there. Interesting thing about putting it all in. And last but not least, all this stuff came together as a result of working with this great client. Interesting fellow, again, sort of be redundant, but he was very innovative, very open to ideation materials. He wasn't dictating things at all. He was very open to it. But then he had a problem with packaging. His packaging, I told him, he asked me about packaging about 2/3 of the way through the process. And I said, well, Vic, in all honesty, your package gets lost in the rest of all. It was very black card with white type. It had no impact on it. His logo wasn't even on it. There was nothing indication that he was American Whistle, the one and only plant in the whole world that does it by hand. I mean, it's incredibly successful. I think it was about 100-year-old, no, I take that back, about an 80-year business. Established its format, but the packaging never changed. So I came back and I said, look, give me a shot at doing some packaging graphics for you, Vic. And let's see what happens with that. So here's the very beginning of some series here that he wanted to look at. Actually, if you look at this, for example, this little area here would be the whistle where it would be packaged. These are, like we call it, the Victory Series, the American Series. We had different names for all the whistles he was manufacturing. So we put together a series of real fast little elevation studies of these card processings and ideas and presented them to him. So let me go through these very quickly. There's phase one, very quick thumbnail sketches, into phase two. Again, notice, trying to get, in every case, trying to get his logo in there to have, and again, notice a bright white card. It really stood out on the aisles of the SKU systems, and then all of a sudden the graphics kind of just jumped. The red, white, and blue, the American theme, really hot. I mean, it's interesting how it all jumped. He loved this approach. And we haven't decided that at this stage of the game, he did not decide on a theme, but he had a great idea, he had a great enthusiasm. Boy, this is really fresh looking. And again, made in the USA. He really wanted to play up the fact that it was made in the USA. And I thought that was extremely strong as well. So let's go back to this. There's a second series of sketches done with it. Then we go back into this. A little more refined now. You started to look at some things that were very interesting. Oh, this is kind of neat how all the header had the flag and my logo in it. This is a little logo with a whistle on the end of it. Again, made in USA, not big enough. Made in USA, a little bit better. You want to really market that up. And again, now from that family of sketches into a little bit more finished material in terms of made in USA, holding some of the packaging areas, and just changing the theme. This would be the Patriot series, which is maybe a red, white, blue series. One would be American. The packaging wouldn't change, but the title would. We'd change color, for example, with those. And then all the indications of what it does, and specs along the left margin here. And this window in the center, this portion right here, oops, pardon me. This portion right here would tell you where that the two whistles would be packaged. So once again, that's it. And another family of forms here. Again, a little bit more finesse. Same basic themes. These last 4 sketches were more finalized from some of the earlier sketches we did. No, thanks very much, Ventura. The delineation was interesting. Packaging's tough, as you all know. Boy, there's so many variations in theme, color, text, type, you name it, messaging, all the elements of design that you have to kind of think of, and not only the product, but the actual presentation of the product. So these are the last set of just thumbnail sketches. Then he picked a direction. He loved this approach. I don't know where that came from. I think it was one of these earlier sketches. Variation on theme here. Let me go back to, was it one of these? I'm not sure. This, I think, yeah, that one basically simplified. So it was that basic format going into that basic direction. A little more swoop in it, a little more character to it. And again, down below, a little bit of the same character. Again, handcrafted, made in USA. Very powerful stuff that you wanted to market to the Walmart people. And then going to the last page here, this is all said and done. This was done with his engineering staff, working with them to get the last little pieces put together. I don't know if I did, are there more sketches in here or not? I'm not sure. Excuse me a moment. Nope, it was a single page. All right, so we're good. There it is there. And then this last little piece right here was, again, some of the actual, going back to the early sketches, some CAD work on what this form might look like. Now, it's a little bit blocky here. This was not the last generation we did. This is the first pass at some of those earlier sketches we showed you theme-wise way back in the early part of the process here. We came back to that basic design. Working with him on this, my comment on this comment, you might feel the same way, guys, Victoria. A little bit too flat, a little bit too severe. Extend some of these forms. We took this shape here, we began to modify it, kind of sweeten it a little bit, and just put a lot more definite. Again, pretty flat plan view. We put a little more shape to it. So the final variation, which I didn't have privacy to, I could not get my hands on. Some of the final development pieces are in his hands, but this is the first pass at a digital phenomenon to get ready for molds and the like in manufacturing process. And he bought all the equipment for it in-house, and just amazing what he did to get this done. But my assessment is almost like an add-on. That should kind of float off the back of the shape itself, a little more crowniness, a little more roundness in it, and to stretch it a little bit and change the plan view. All these little pieces made a huge difference in getting it all put together. So that basically does it for this whole product design thing. And again, my regrets, for example, for not being able to wrap up the Porsche materials I didn't have on hand. I had them, but they're not the kind of materials I want to work with in this final illustration for the Porsche. So that kind of wraps it up there, Victor. What do you think, Victor? Is it meaningful for you? You had some this helped to see what the spread of the process is in the design world. It's all over the place. It's product design, it's architectural, exterior, interior space, landscape design, transportation design, and so on. It's been a lot of interesting things here. So has this been helpful to you, Ventura? Thank you so much for joining me today. You're the lone gunner, but I'm glad you're with us. Pretty cool. So any questions or concerns that you might have here before we wrap it up and show the Porsche a bit, what we're going to wrap up with here? Concept to execution is always a fun, yeah, it really is a fun adventure. It's a lot of winding road to get there, but you know full well that's what makes it magical. You never hit you never get on all 12 cylinders in the very beginning, but if you start the engine little by little, so you get there bit by bit. Really good process to go through. This, for me, was a very incredibly great learning process, because this gentleman, extremely innovative, very much in tune with his product was. Going back to square one, let's go back to this one. He knew exactly what he wanted in terms of a molded piece. Hey, Demetrius, how are you? I've been watching. How you doing, Doctor? Thanks for joining forces. Has this made sense for you, Demetrius? Very cool. I wouldn't say it's awesome, but it's another learning process that we went through. And to me, as I began to explain, really amazed me how much I've learned from this gentleman about how does the market work, how does clientele base work. He puts on clearly some workshops in his shop for young people, and he has them go through an exercise where they design their own whistle, and he has them make them. It's just, I was a part of that process, an extremely rewarding process to work with. So I'm looking forward to getting back with him here, maybe by mid-year. He's got some things coming up he wants me to work on, and I would love to join forces with him again. And again, it's great to have you on board there, Demetrius and Ventura. Now, let me switch gears for a second here. Let's get rid of this guy. And I want to talk about this wrap up here. I don't know if you saw this, but we ended up, for example, the other day, there's the actual Porsche piece itself there for sports fans. I went back in for what it's worth, and here, lo and behold, I'm all set to go, and I'm like, oh man, it's going to be really great to do this thing on Thursday, wrap it all up. But the background is going to be very elaborate, not elaborate, but it's going to complement the actual forms themselves, the sketch itself. I didn't want to push it. I had the wrong materials. I didn't have the right black. I didn't have the right red or the right yellow in the pastel. I want to get a little richer with it. And I want to blend it in. For example, starting out, if you can imagine this first third, really rich black, kind of get that bounce off of the actual car itself. Rich black into a real strong red into a real faded yellow, and then the Porsche logo up in the upper left-hand corner. So that was the reason for the delay here with the Porsche bit today, and I really am disappointed. I didn't get a chance to wrap it up. I hope my audience is not upset that I had to switch gears, but I didn't want to compromise and go this far with this illustration. I wanted to do a top-notch job of getting it done and making sure that thing really sang when it's all said and done. A lot of time spent, as we said, on Tuesday, putting the sketch in. That's a very labor-intensive. It's not the greatest sketch in the world, but it's a lot of reflection. I wanted to capture a lot of the subtleties in the Porsche body forms itself, and then again with the targa open up and the seating, the interior pieces inside. I might go back in on Tuesday when I get materials in and tighten up the drawing a little bit more and put a little bit of highlight and tempera to it, but not much. I'm going to keep this extremely exclusive, and then the compliment is to go from where they are now in the production cycle and what it might look like down the road. Some of these flavor, for example, might come back into Porsche's lineage in time to come. It won't be as dramatic as an LMP car, but it'll have that same basic heritage to it. Maybe some of the Snoot graphics, some of the new lighting systems might come back into play too. So that's why I kind of pull back a little bit on the whole concept of finishing this up. I did not want to rush it, and I'm glad I didn't, because I want to make sure coming in on Tuesday, we're going to roll over this thing. I'll have the materials ready to fly, and we'll do a nice job of masking off the area and showing how that whole pastel thing works and how to blend them and how to make that thing complement the actual illustration. So to all of you, hey, Victoria and Demetrius, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. I don't want to delay your day any further here, and it's always a joy to have you guys on board. And last question, each of you. Worthwhile, makes sense here today, guys? Explanation-wise, hopefully everything good? And if you have any questions in closing here, fire away. Always great to hear from you, and the input I respect enormously. So feel free to just anything at all you want to add to the program or the stream. It's always good to have your 2 cents. It's worth $1,000, no question. Very cool. So what's the next thing we're going to do? Well, the next thing we're going to do, I think I'm going to do this. I'll wrap this thing up here, Victoria, on Tuesday, and I'm going to go back into some what I think is some advanced Cadillac work, possible, or else doing some aircraft. I've got a really neat sketch started on an overhead view of the B-2 bomber. That could be kind of fun too. So I'm lining all these things up, and it may be into some architectural stuff. I might be doing some bridge. Yeah, it's going to be really cool. Either advanced Cadillac, shooting brake, maybe next week, and also the B-2 bomber is going to be on the agenda. I'm also going to start doing some landscape work. I've got a thing coming up that getting into some park design and some features, how to work that all together. So I'm going to change the module here quite a bit. I don't want to get caught up, for example, all the time doing vehicle work or getting caught up with just cars. It's a lot of fun to do that, but I like to change pace, product architecture, interior space. And if there's something, Victoria, you want me to focus in on, by all means, please send me a note, jim@drcontrast.com, and I'll begin to put together a program for that. Same with you, Demetrius. So things you want to look at, for example, yeah, please do, Victor. I mean, that's what makes this program to me extremely exciting, because there's an input coming from you. It's not all coming from me. What do you think in terms of what would you like me to work on? What do you see coming together? How can I help you? And it helps myself. So please feel free to be very open in terms of sending me a note at jim@drcontrast.com. You'd like to see how light works, you'd like to see how shading works, something of that, how perspective works, anything like that. If I can assist you, be happy to do so. And going back to that programming, it changes from day to day. Sometimes it's very consistent, but I like to keep it very lucid and changing subject matter. And notice one last thing before I leave here: a lot of time spent last near the end of the day putting a lot more detail, some more temper, a little more color back in the graphics, and some more lighting detail in some of the wheel graphics. So those little things make a huge difference. So gentlemen, thank you so much for the time, and again, really appreciate the time spent with me. It's always good to have you on board, Victoria, and Demetrius, so much to you as well. And I always say this too, I think it's very important. Please drop me a note at jim@drcontrast.com. Please visit my website. If you know somebody who's interested in looking at this kind of stuff, I would really appreciate coming back in and voicing, letting your friends know that I'm live on Tuesday, Thursdays, and I'd have them join us. And again, always good to time with you too as well, Victoria. Great talent, and I really respect your skill set enormously. So keep up the great work. You as well, Demetrius. And again, so much for that, folks. So thank you very much for joining forces today. Always good to have you on board. And I've always stated this in closing: there's no doubt in my heart of hearts that dare to be great, because you are. I mean, always remember that. No matter what the skill set is, you've got a talent to deal with and to work with, so always dare to be great. And again, from Dr. Contrast to you, all the very best. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll pick up this Porsche piece on Tuesday and really put that thing and just scream that thing with live and in color. So all the best, gang. Thanks so much. Take care of yourself, and so much appreciate the time. Thank you. Bye-bye.